Welcome to the Kindness Extremist Podcast. I'm your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa. I've spoken to tens of thousands of people all over the world about the importance of kindness. And I am obsessed with how we can bring more kindness into our daily lives and restore balance to a deeply unbalanced world. Every episode, I'll give you 3 practical strategies to create a kinder world, and I'll do it in 30 minutes or less. No fluff, just valuable, actionable content that you can implement in your life immediately after listening to help you actively create a kinder world. There's no time to waste. Let's dive in. What's up, family? Welcome back. It's an honor you're here for episode 4 of the Kindness Extremist Podcast. This week, I want to talk about something that I'm confident that you've experienced. First, let me set the scene. Imagine this. You're at a gathering with extended family, and without fail, there's always that one family member. Let's call her Auntie Brenda. Here's the thing about Auntie Brenda. For some reason, before every family gathering, besides unnecessarily adding raisins to perfectly fine cakes and pies, she always seems to wake up choosing violence, and she always wants all the smoke when it comes to discussions about polarizing topics. If that wasn't annoying enough, she's always actively looking for a fight. She's a master at shoehorning in her opinions and ideologies into any conversation so she can go toe-to-toe with you. For example, when you share with Auntie Brenda that your 1-year-old daughter took her first steps last week, Auntie Brenda's predictable response is, "That's great news. That's almost as exciting as the first steps our beloved governor took to destroy everyone in your political party." If you're listening to this and thinking, come on, Shola, stop exaggerating. No one talk like that at family gatherings. I must ask with kindness, because, need to stay on brand here. In what universe are you living in? And more importantly, can you DM me the coordinates of this magical universe? Because I'd love to move there immediately. Jokes aside, the most common question I receive from my email subscribers, audience members at my talks, or in my social media DMs is how to manage polarizing conversations that are known to go off the rails. These discussions could be with Auntie Brenda at Thanksgiving dinner, or that random guy from high school who can't stop commenting on all your social media posts, or even with a colleague at work. One minute, you're having a normal conversation, and the next minute, you're in a full-blown argument about politics, abortion, gun control, immigration, or the Middle East. Thankfully, there's a better way, but it's going to require us to get strategic. In this episode, I'm going to share the strategies that will increase the odds of polarizing conversations actually staying on the rails. The good news is that the strategies that I'll be sharing will not require you to weaken your stance, and you'll be able to fight like hell for what you care about, all while staying kind and respectful. Sound good? Also, in the spirit of full transparency and self-kindness, now is the perfect time to acknowledge this life-enhancing truth. Some folks are not worth our time and our energy, and the sooner that we can identify those folks, the better. Woo, buddy! There's a lot to dive into. So without further ado, let's jump into the first kind of strategy. Before diving into the first kind of strategy, let me set the scene so we're on the same page. Imagine this. You invite the extended family over to the crib for a big family gathering, and as predicted, Auntie Brenda is rolling through because she's never going to miss a chance to darken your door with her gross, inedible, raisin-infused cakes and pies. Worse than that, though, as we've already established, Auntie Brenda is all about choosing violence, and she's in a particularly salty mood this evening. Why? Well, an important election just took place last week, and her chosen candidate, let's call this candidate Smith, lost by a very close margin, and she's not happy about it at all. To make things more interesting, the candidate that you voted for, let's call this candidate Richards, was the one who won the election, and you're absolutely thrilled about it. Still, though, you have no intention of gloating. You're just hoping to enjoy a peaceful, drama-free family gathering without wading into politics. Unfortunately for you, though, Auntie Brenda is not about that life. She's heated about the L her candidate took, and she's going to make sure that you know all about it. Auntie Brenda corners you in the kitchen and says, "Ugh,
I can't believe that anyone would vote for that weirdo candidate Richards. She thinks she's better than everyone because she has a fancy Ivy League degree, but I can see right through her. She's a fraud who's going to destroy our community because she has no clue what she's doing. Anyone who voted for that terrible woman needs to get their head examined.
It's on now, right?
Well, not necessarily. Now that we've set the scene, allow me to present the first kindness strategy in this episode. Before entering a potentially polarizing conversation, set clear parameters with a simple 3-step process I call setting the ground rules. Let's see how this might play out with our gal, Auntie Brenda. Side note, I literally just thought of this. I'm so sorry if you're listening to this podcast episode and your name is Brenda. I just needed a name and hers was the first name that I came up with. As a reminder, Auntie Brenda just said that anyone who voted for candidate Richards needs to get their head examined. Also, as a reminder, you happily and enthusiastically voted for candidate Richards. There's a problem here. This is where setting the ground rules come in. Here are the 3 steps of a well-executed ground rule. Step 1. Instead of immediately firing back with your perspective, take a beat and check yourself. Acknowledge to the other person that you're about to enter a conversation where emotions could run high. Step 2. Ask the other person a simple yes or no question to see if they're willing to engage respectfully. Step 3. If you receive anything less than a yes, feel free to disengage. If you do receive a yes, then continue the discussion. If during the discussion, the other person breaks the agreement, remind them of the agreement. Let's put this all together, beginning with your response. I have some thoughts on this, but before I share them, can we agree to have a respectful conversation even if we disagree? At this point, there are only 2 ways this conversation could play out. Option A, if Auntie Brenda says, sure, of course, then you set the stage for a productive conversation. Feel free to proceed. On the other hand, there's option B. If Auntie Brenda says something like, what? Are you saying that you voted for that awful woman, candidate Richards? If so, you shouldn't be allowed to raise my beautiful niece if you're dumb enough to vote for her. And no, I won't stay respectful because there's nothing to respect about you and your stupid opinion. I'm leaving. You know what? If she does leave, hopefully she'll take her gross raisin pie thing with her because no one's trying to eat that nastiness. Obviously, in this instance, if Auntie Brenda chooses option B when you kindly set the ground rules, then you know that this probably isn't going to be a productive conversation. At that point, choose to disengage. I need to say this with my whole chest, so please hear me when I say this. The only way to eliminate unproductive conflict is to reduce our time participating in it. More on this later when I share the third kindness strategy. However, back to the scenario. If Auntie Brenda chose option A and is willing to be respectful, here's how you could respond without fighting fire with fire. I actually voted for candidate Richards. Personally, I wanted to choose a candidate who was compassionate, who has a demonstrated track record of fighting for people from all walks of life, and is open-minded and is humble enough to admit her mistakes. That's the kind of example I want to set for my daughter, and I feel that candidate Richards is a perfect example of that. Note a few things in that response. You didn't take the bait when Auntie Brenda said that you need to get your head examined. You didn't attack her for voting for candidate Smith. You simply stated your opinion clearly and respectfully. If we're being real here, most of these conversations go sideways because we don't establish clear ground rules from the beginning. We just dive in assuming the other person is operating with the same understanding of what a respectful conversation looks like. And as we both know, that's not how conversations around highly charged topics typically work. This kind of strategy might seem simple, but it is incredibly powerful. By explicitly setting ground rules, you're creating a container for the conversation that both parties have agreed to honor. And when someone breaks those rules, and trust me, they will, you have something concrete to reinforce. Please don't get it twisted. Setting ground rules doesn't guarantee a perfect conversation, but it significantly increases the odds that you'll be able to exchange ideas without descending into personal attacks. The beauty of this approach is that it works in virtually any context, whether you're discussing politics with a relative, addressing a sensitive issue at work, or engaging with someone online. And here's the thing. Even if the conversation doesn't go well, you still succeeded because you've shown that it's possible to approach difficult topics with respect, emotional maturity, and kindness. And in these wild times, that is definitely a win.
Hey, fellow kindness extremists, it's me, Shola. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, if you're mowing what I'm growing, if you're smelling what I'm stepping in. Okay, I'll stop. If you're enjoying what you're listening to so far, I would love it if you would take a moment to hit the subscribe button and leave a rating and a review. Those incredibly kind acts go so far in helping me to reach as many people as possible who will join the movement to actively create a kinder world. I appreciate you so much, my friend. Okay, let's get back to the episode.
Now let's move on to the second kind of strategy, finding common ground. A lot of people struggle with this one, and I want to be very clear about what I mean about this common ground stuff. One of the biggest myths about being kind is that it requires us to agree on everything or to water down our beliefs, and that is simply not true. Kindness doesn't mean that you need to agree with everyone in order to keep the peace and avoid rocking the boat. Remember, that's not kindness, that's niceness. And if you're unclear about the difference, please go back and listen to episode 1 of this podcast. Kindness is not about finding agreement with everyone because that's impossible and completely out of our control. What is possible and completely within our control is how we choose to treat others despite our disagreements. That said, finding common ground can be an incredibly effective way to keep a difficult conversation productive. It creates a foundation of shared values or concerns that you can actually build upon. The second kind of strategy is simple but not easy. The key to finding common ground is to look beneath the surface level disagreements to identify shared values or concerns. Here's a short list of things that almost everyone cares about: safety, freedom, fairness, and the well-being of their loved ones. The problem is that we often disagree about how to achieve these things. Let me give you an example from my book, Civil Unity. Imagine you're discussing gun control with someone who has a very different view on it than you do. Instead of immediately focusing on your policy disagreements, you might say, I think that we both want to live in a world where people are safe from violence, right? And I imagine we both value our constitutional freedoms too. We might disagree on the best way to balance these things, but I think that it's best to remember that we have some important shared values, right? By starting with what you agree on, you're creating the foundation for mutual understanding. Personally, I love to challenge people during polarizing conversations by asking, what do you think is a compromise solution that would work for both sides? This doesn't mean that you won't disagree, because possibly you will, but the tone of that disagreement will be very different. The reason that finding common ground works so well is that it taps into our deep human need for connection. It also works because it disrupts the us versus them mentality that fuels so much of our division these days. When we realize that we share core values with someone we disagree with, it becomes harder to demonize them. I want to share another personal example of how finding common ground transformed a potentially divisive conversation. Last year, I was hanging out with a group of people following a controversial incident at a college campus. Two of the people in the group had very different perspectives on the incident, and they found themselves getting heated in the conversation. It was about to really escalate until another person in the group said something to both of them. Look, I know you both see this situation differently, but I think we all believe that everyone attending college should feel safe and respected. Can we at least start there? It was a powerful moment, and that simple acknowledgement of common ground completely changed the dynamic. Yes, they disagreed on specifics, but they were able to have a productive conversation because they identified their shared goal. Finding common ground isn't about compromising your values or pretending that you agree when you really don't. It's about recognizing that beneath our disagreements, we often share concerns and aspirations if we have the stamina to look for them. This approach isn't just useful for political conversations. It works in romantic relationships, workplace conflicts, community disagreements, even with your kids, basically anywhere where two parties do not see eye to eye. So the next time you find yourself in a heated conversation or disagreement, pause and ask yourself, what might we agree on here? What shared value or concern could we build upon? That simple shift in focus can transform the conversation. However, keeping it real, there will be times where setting the ground rules or finding common ground won't work. And that's where the third kind of strategy comes in. Now let's talk about our third strategy, which might be the most challenging of all. Knowing when a conversation is not worth our time or our energy. As much as I believe in the power of kindness, I also recognize that not every conversation is worth having. Some people aren't interested in good faith dialogue. Some topics are just too triggering at certain moments, and sometimes we just don't have the emotional bandwidth to process a difficult conversation. Here's your third takeaway. Learn to identify when a conversation is unlikely to be productive and develop graceful ways to disengage. There's an old saying that goes, honeybees don't waste a moment of their time trying to convince houseflies that honey tastes better than shit. Sadly, there are plenty of houseflies in this world. These are the people who are unreasonably closed-minded, tightly tethered to their views, and have no interest in respectful dialogue. Here's the truth that took me years to understand and accept. You don't owe your time and energy to everyone, especially to the houseflies. It is okay and, quite frankly, necessary to disengage from conversations that are not going anywhere productive. If you're wondering, how do I know when to disengage from a conversation? Well, here are 5 signs that I use to know it is time to disengage. 1, the person repeatedly responds with personal attacks rather than addressing your points. 2, they show no willingness to consider alternative perspectives. 3, they consistently misrepresent your position despite your clarifications. 4, the conversation is causing you significant emotional distress. 5, your attempts to set the ground rules or find common ground are kicked aside, dismissed, or ignored. When you notice any of these 5 signs, it's usually best to gracefully exit the conversation. This doesn't mean that you lost or that kindness has failed. It means you're being strategic about where you invest your energy, which is a kindness toward yourself. So how do you disengage gracefully? Here are a few approaches that I love, that I use. You might say something like, I appreciate your passion on the topic, but I don't think we're going to find common ground on this issue right now. Or you could say, this topic is getting pretty heated, and I value our relationship more than winning this particular argument. Can we talk about something else? Of course, only use this if you truly do value the relationship. Or you could say, I need to reflect on this more before continuing the conversation. Let's take a break and maybe pick this up again later. The key is to disengage without dismissing or disrespecting the other person. There's no need to fight fire with fire. The last thing our world needs is more houseflies. There's one very important exception to this rule, though. If the other party is hitting you with bigoted, racist, hateful rhetoric, there's no need to be concerned with disengaging gracefully. This is wildly out of pocket. But if someone came up to me and said, you know what? I think black people are no different than monkeys. I'm not going to say to this person, kind sir, I appreciate your passion, but can we agree to disagree on that, please? Hell no! There's no agreeing to disagree with someone who doesn't recognize my humanity or my right to exist in peace. As the well-circulated meme says, we can agree to disagree on pizza toppings, but not about my humanity. Even in situations like this, don't waste your precious time swatting away houseflies. The kindest thing that we can do is to protect our peace, remove ourselves from the situation, and let unkind people continue to foolishly eat the poop of unkindness like the houseflies that they are. A few years ago, I got into a debate on social media with someone who had posted misleading statistics about a topic I care deeply about. This person messed with the wrong guy because I came armed with receipts. I provided accurate information with credible sources, but instead of engaging with my points, this person responded with personal attacks and increasingly outlandish claims. Yes, I know, I should have recognized the signs and disengaged early, but I kept responding, thinking that I could somehow break through if I just found the right words or the right approach. This went on for hours. I was so consumed with winning this argument against a total stranger that I took my phone into the bathroom with me so I wouldn't miss a response from this person. I'm literally on the toilet with gritted teeth like, grrr, I'll show you who's right, random stranger. It was not my proudest moment, to put it mildly. After hours of back and forth that left me equal parts infuriated and emotionally drained, I finally stepped away. But not before this exchange ruined my entire day. What I realized afterwards was that I actually wasn't trying to have a conversation. I was trying to win. And in doing so, I violated my own principles about kindness. This experience taught me a very important lesson. Knowing when to walk away is just as important as knowing how to engage. It's about being strategic about which conversations are worth having. If nothing else, please remember this. Your time and your emotional energy are finite resources. When you spend both of those precious resources on conversations that have no chance of being productive, you have less time and less energy to spend on conversations that actually have a chance of making some sort of positive difference. The next time you find yourself in a conversation that's going nowhere, and yes, sadly, you will, remember that it's okay to disengage. It's not a failure of kindness. It's an act of wisdom. Okay, to recap, here are the 3 strategies in this episode. The first kindness strategy is to set the ground rules when you're about to enter into a polarizing conversation. First, acknowledge that you're about to engage into a conversation where emotions could rise quickly. Second, directly ask if they're willing to stay respectful throughout the conversation. And third, only proceed if they're willing to do so. And if not, save your breath and don't engage. The second kindness strategy is to find common ground. The key to finding common ground is to look beneath the surface level disagreements to identify shared values or concerns. Whether it's safety, freedom, fairness, equality, or the well-being of their loved ones, common ground is there if you search hard enough for it. The final kindness strategy of this episode is to know when to disengage. Our time and energy are finite, and we don't need to give a shred of it to people who are only interested in entering into discussions in bad faith. Remember, we can only begin the process of eliminating unproductive conflict if we reduce our time participating in it. Most of all, remember this. In a world full of houseflies, please choose to be a honeybee. If you do that, I truly believe that a kinder world will be waiting for us on the other side. This is your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa, and you now know that kindness can't be weak because you just experienced the strength of the Kindness Extremist Podcast. Until next time, friends, the journey to a kinder world continues.
Thank you for listening to the Kindness Extremist Podcast. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode. And I have one favor to ask. If you could kindly hit the subscribe button, leave a rating and a review, not only would that be incredibly kind, but by doing so, you're actively playing a role in growing this movement and ideally getting us one step closer to creating a kinder world. Hope to see you next week for another episode of the Kindness Extremist Podcast.